Meantime, we've been monitoring progress, call it that maybe, between Republicans and Democrats to try and reach consensus on what the next round of stimulus might look like there. And we did hear the update over the weekend when you look at Stephen Moore highlighting the issue there in terms of how the steam may or may not be taken out of the sails here when we think about Republicans coming to the table. So what will be passed? For more on that, I want to bring on our next guest. Mattie Duppler, National Taxpayers Union Senior Fellow, joins us right now. And Mattie, I just want to highlight another piece on the Republican side. White House advisor Kevin Hassett mentioning over the weekend that there is still definitely support there on the Republican side for another stimulus package. But when we look at what Republicans are pushing for, definitely not lining up with what Democrats want. Mainly they want potentially a bonus here as we get Americans back to work, as well as liability protections for businesses. That was not really what Democrats are pushing for. So where do you see concessions and how we could walk away with a deal moving forward?
Well, first, the most important Republican in Washington, D.C., Donald Trump, has said that he certainly thought there would be another stimulus package. So I would take the president at his word there that progress continues to move forward, that there will be more progress on finding some kind of consensus solution. I think that Stephen Moore and other suggestions that one good month of jobs numbers merits a complete reversal in what Washington has been doing to support the economy is pretty non-founded. So, when it comes to the policy and where Republicans and Democrats can find consensus, I think there are a couple of arenas. One is really providing that bridge between unemployed Americans right now and where they want to be in a couple of months getting back to work. As you know, in the CARES Act, unemployment expansion was passed that extends until July 31st. That's really the next deadline that matters in Washington. What is Washington going to do to allow those workers to get back to work? Now, having a good jobs number in May certainly puts wind in the sails of some of the efforts that Washington has already passed. I think it demonstrates that efforts like the PPP loans, like the employee retention tax credit, efforts to keep employers attached to their employees has actually been successful. It's allowed workers to get back online as states start to reopen. So what states, workers, and employees need now from Washington is continued certainty as we move into the next couple of weeks and months that there will be support for those businesses as they negotiate their new circumstances, whether it's social distancing, needs for PPE. We know that their circumstances will be different and they won't be able to scale to 100% automatically. So Congress needs to send the signal that it has the rest of the country's employers back as they navigate those circumstances.
Now, you're right to highlight that July timeline when we talk about the end of July, that $600 additional federal boost in terms of unemployment benefits. That's the ticking time bomb there for what's going to happen on the flip side. If Republicans are pushing for a similar bonus for people going back to work, it does very notably shift the incentive to get people back in the office or at least working from home. But when you think about the big question mark that hasn't been addressed is this potential second wave. We've been talking about protests around the country and how that could change things. Does that kind of maybe support the idea of necessarily needing to wait, maybe get another jobs number in here before you pass another stimulus bill, maybe just to figure it all out?
Well, I certainly think that this is a continuing exercise to get the right data, both on the public health front, but also on the economic front. 1 month of jobs data means that the economy may be happening quicker than anticipated, but it doesn't mean the recovery is a foregone conclusion. That's why Washington's setting the signal that there will be certainty in public policy for the next remaining months of the summer before we head into the fall is so important. I think that really the question from a public policy standpoint on public health is whether or not we see a resurgence in the fall. That means that we have several months to try and gird the economy against another round of infections, if that is the case. Right now, the question of whether or not these protests are going to increase the infection rate. I'm in Wisconsin, where there was a lot of conversation about whether or not that voting in early April was going to create more infections. We haven't seen that spike yet. So hopefully that means that there are environmental factors at work here when it comes to the infection rate. But certainly public policymakers have a huge role to play here to give businesses certainty and to give them support. I mean, things like tax credits for PPE or for making changes to their business so they can accommodate social distancing, I think would be a wise move here so people can get back to work, but they can do so safely.
Yeah, and I guess just one of the last things, our viewers are always constantly interested, no doubt, as to why, always interested in the idea of another round of stimulus checks that was, of course, included in the HEROES Act when you think about what Democrats are pushing for here. What's your take on maybe the percentage chances of that getting through based on how Republicans are battling right now and their positioning right now? If you had to assign a percentage chance of another wave of stimulus checks getting passed, where do you think that sits? And also, what might the impact be when you think about how many stimulus checks are still out there? We got numbers saying that about 30 million checks are still waiting to be sent to a few Americans who might not have had direct deposit set up or issues like that. So how effective would they be?
Well, Zach, Vegas might be open, but I am not a betting woman when it comes to Washington, D.C. I will say that individual payments are not the biggest sticking point for Republicans and what Democrats are demanding. Really, it's more of those durable institutional supports like the expansion of UI and like getting workers back to work. Those are the things where really the rubber hits the road on negotiations right now. When it comes to individual payments, I think there are some benefits to doing another round in the sense that the IRS has now already gone through the practice of getting those things out the door. And when the IRS did that initially, the IRS was completely shut down just like the rest of us. People were working from home. There weren't people answering phones. Now there's a question of whether or not people haven't received their first round of stimulus payments. Those people are probably folks who haven't filed a tax return for last year, or they don't make enough money to really show up in government counts either on the IRS side or on government benefits side. The IRS, though, now has people back to work. They have people answering phones. They have people opening mail. They have a backlog of tax returns to get through. That means that Treasury is going to have more data to be able to get more payments out to people. So if it ends up that Congress passes another round of individual payments, I see it going a lot more seamlessly than the first round, which, to be fair, went fairly well. If you remember back in 2008 when we did this, it took 2 months to get those payments out the door. Treasury really put its nose to the grindstone and got those checks to people, and it made a difference. Personal incomes went up last month as a result.
No, credit where credit's due. We have seen Secretary Mnuchin take a victory lap on that front, but he has gotten a considerable amount of checks out the door. But Mattie Duppler, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us.